Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Miller, and it is my pleasure to have with us this afternoon Dr. David Cohen, who is going to lead us through the webinar. David, if you could begin, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Michael. I welcome everybody. It seems, according to those who've signed up, we are both in the United States and Canada today. And in Canada, we're literally coast to coast to coast. So that's exciting to see so many people are interested in this topic of behavioral interviewing and hiring for fit to culture. A little bit about myself. I've been in the management consulting world after I left 15 years in education. I had grown to the rank of headmaster at a series of private schools. And after the last one here in Toronto, after about 2 years, I realized that I didn't like parents anymore. If it wasn't for parents, I'd probably still be doing it. So in a lot of ways, I thank them for forcing me out of education and into consulting, where I believe I still continue my passion for educating and helping people grow and learn and expand their horizon. In the process, I've worked with organizations all over the world. I've worked on every continent except for Antarctica and Australia. I've worked with large companies, small companies, startups, government, and municipalities, and have in the process written 2 books. The first book, The Talent Edge, is about how to write behavioral competencies and conduct structured behavioral interviews. If you do read it, you'll notice in the book, compared to what I'm going to say today, there's a number of points that I've evolved on. The book is almost 20 years old, and I've been doing this a long time. And I keep improving based on the reality of the workplace and what I learned from my clients. The second book is a more timeless book. It's about corporate culture, leadership and values, business ethics, and how does it impact talent. The other part of my life is with my family. There's my youngest son is on the right. My oldest grandson is on the left. That was the first game this year at the Raptors, and I'll be going with my oldest son to the game number 5 for the championship, and hopefully they'll do better than they did last time. What are we going to cover today? Why you need to hire to your culture. So what we're going to talk about is what is culture. So there are many, many different people that come up with articles and writings and books and blogs on what is on culture, and many of them fail to actually define. They make an assumption that everybody has the same definition of culture, but we don't. So I want to make sure that when I talk about hiring to fit the culture, that there's a foundation of what culture is and how important it is. Then we're going to get into why are behavioral statements so important, and what's the difference between a behavioral statement and an outcome statement. Then we're going to look at how to measure an intangible, because a behavior is an intangible, and then get into how to write an authentic behavioral question. And at the very end, I'll give some hints on scoring that. So first things first, let's take a look at what is culture and the power of culture. So let's begin with a story here. This is an experiment that was done at a university in the United States, and it involved putting a group of monkeys into a room. And as they put those monkeys in the room, they put on a ladder, or actually they put up a rope, but I couldn't find a rope that I could use. So that allowed them to go up, and they would get their bananas, and they were all happy little monkeys. Then they decided, as the next monkey would go up to the ladder, they were hit by a stream of water and knocked them off. And then again, another monkey would go up the ladder, get hit by a stream of water, and that continued until all 10 monkeys in the room realized that going for the banana would cause them to be hit by a stream of water, and they changed their behavior. And although they were hungry, they did not go up the ladder and get the bananas. So behavior is associated, obviously, with culture. Behavior is a manifestation of the culture. And so what happened is they took one monkey out of the room, and they put a new monkey in the room. And that monkey, seeing the bananas, decided to go up. But what was interesting is the other monkeys came and prevented the new monkey, who did not experience the stream of water, from going up the ladder. And that continued as they replaced each monkey. They continued to have that. And it took 3 generations of monkeys of fully replacing the previous generations before they went up the ladder. So 2 points. One, behavior is a manifestation of the values. How we act, how we react is a manifestation. I just posted on LinkedIn an article on purpose and passion. And one of the things that I put up there as a quote is, "It is not the CEO's speech that matters. It's the speech the CEO lives that matters." And it's about that behavior that others follow. It is also, I've learned over the years in working in Southeast Asia in particular, it is also about culture. And culture is important from the point of view that local culture will override global culture from the point of view of corporations. So while a US corporation might want to go into Southeast Asia or Africa or someplace else where the behaviors are very different, people have been brought up and their life has been validated through the behaviors that got them to be successful locally. And suddenly being introduced to new culture, they are not very willing to accept that. For example, respect in the United States might mean speaking your mind, speaking up, and allowing your voice to be heard, and your manager would expect that. In Asia, speaking up could get you to be demoted, lose your job, relegated somewhere else. In the United States, respect might be if someone's a non-performer, to actually be honest with them and move them out of the company. In Asia, people just never lose their job. Generally speaking, they are usually just relegated to a different position. So there's geographic culture and there's corporate culture, and the two of them have to align. Otherwise, you're going to run into problems. Now, Hofstede, who's done a lot of the studies on culture, and especially as an example, indicating that power distance, for instance, the amount of ability of a direct report to feel comfortable talking to a director or a more senior person is smaller in the North America, in Canada and the US, while in Asia, in Malaysia, for instance, it's the highest. It's at 100 points. So the reality is somebody who behaves a correct way in one location, behaving the same way for another corporation, even a corporation that's even in the same city, in the same business, even in the same geographic area, those corporations have different sets of correct behavior. So somebody who is successful in one organization doesn't necessarily translate to being successful in another because of behavior. And I'll expand on that a little bit more. So Hofstede says it's the collective mental programming of the people in the environment, which now makes sense. Also, he indicates that people who are conditioned by the same or similar education and life experiences. It also means it's impacted by that of groups, tribes, religions, minorities, majorities, or nations. In other words, again, reinforcing the concept that there are differences that are created when the social environment is different. It is difficult to change, if it is at all, to change if it changes slowly. And this is something which I've been preaching for many years. And I know that I have been dubbed the contrarian consultant as a result of this. Organization culture doesn't change, it evolves slowly. The number of corporations that have been studied that successfully have evolved their culture more rapidly, according to a number of studies at MIT and Harvard, is in the 10 to 15% range, which means 85 to 90% of corporations that engage in culture change fail. They fail because they try to do it too quickly, and they don't realize it's an evolutionary process because people hold on to those behaviors that have made them successful. So put this into real-time sort of perspective. What is culture? Culture, or the underpinning of culture, are the values, that which one will not compromise on. Values I define as strongly held beliefs, emotionally charged, resistant to change, universally applied. You can't be, at different parts of the organization, you can't have different definitions of respect. It has to be a universal definition applied to everybody the same way. Those, therefore, create those norms of expected behavior, usually the unwritten rules that people have learned to accept as the right way of doing things. And when a new employee comes in and is about to do the wrong thing or something that might not be acceptable, if they're liked by somebody, that person quickly tells them, oh, don't do that. That's not the way we do things around here. So it's the way we make decisions, manage information, treat people, and most importantly, handle conflict and differences. They're articulated through symbols, rituals, ceremonies, etc. What I call corporate legends, those are the stories that employees know about an incident in which somebody either was very brave and courageous and lived the values and did above and beyond, or contrarily, they actually violated the values and it led to a great issue within the company. Those corporate legends live on in organizations through storytelling, which is a very powerful way of transmitting culture in any organization, any society. What this impacts is your employee brand. And what is the employee brand? The employee brand simply is how your employees expect internally to be treated by one another. So you can say that you value A, B, C, and D, but if nobody actually has the behaviors for that, your employee brand, while it might be on your website to say A, B, C, and D, your employee brand in reality is X, Y, and Z. The reality is that if that also conflicts with what your employees really want, and people keep talking about what's on your website as your values, you create a great deal of cynicism in your organization. The employee brand is your identity. It's how we treat one another and how we treat, therefore, in turn, our customers, suppliers. It becomes the reputation that is perceived internally and therefore transmitted externally. So there's just a snapshot of what I've been presenting. So a company's lived values are the company's code of ethical conduct. Therefore, in my opinion, it is imperative that when you hire staff, you hire them knowing that they already live and align to the behaviors that define getting along with each other, making the right decisions, and treating people the way that you want to be perceived as treating people. Therefore, senior leaders will have more confidence in their employee base as doing the right thing, especially when there's no guidelines to do the right thing. Those become your guidelines. So behaviors, therefore, impact business results. If, in fact, you have people in an organization that are being treated in a way that they disagree with, they're demotivated, they're not focused, they don't behave the right way. Others begin to learn that they're not being treated that way, and they learn that they're disgruntled. I can often see that. For instance, I walked into a hotel. I travel quite a bit, and I walked into a hotel in Ottawa that I frequently visited, and the atmosphere in the lobby among the employees had changed. I could tell by the behaviors, the lack of eye contact, the lack of smiles, which had preceded all the other visits for a long time. And when I got to the front desk and there was a person there that I knew, I quietly asked the person, "Do you have a new hotel manager?" And they smiled and said, how could you tell? And I could tell by the behavior that that new manager was trying to change things that were not comfortable to the employees who had been very successful for many years behaving differently. So behaviors impact business results. As a matter of fact, it is said that Drucker said that culture eats strategy for breakfast, I would differ and modify that statement to say that culture is your strategy for your business. The activities that execute that are simply your strategy. So why is this important? When I started working after I left education with Hay Management many years ago, I was asked, because of my background in curriculum design, to help them put together a 5-day program on leadership in customer service. Being that while my doctorate is in organizational behavior and human behavior, I was asked to do a lot of reading and I had to do a lot of reading and research on the business side of things and catch up with what's going on. And one of the partners asked me, "Well, what have you concluded so far?" And this is what I said, and he smiled and said, "You seem to have it right, is people are hired for their knowledge and experience. They are promoted because of their success and fired because of their behaviors." And reality is interesting because we also did a follow-up study on this to validate it. And we did it with about 1,500 people in the from corporations in downtown Toronto area on Bay Street, the financial district. And we followed up with 1,500 people, and the numbers were very staggering. Those people that we called, it was 3 months after they had been let go. We wrote them a letter. There was no emails at the time. And we wrote them a letter, so we'd like to call them at home and ask them a few questions on research we were doing. We got about 1,500 people that said yes. We called them up, myself and others. We called them up, and then we asked them one simple question: what was the perception that caused them to leave? What did they perceive they did or didn't do that caused them to leave? And then we compared that with the managers, and about 83% alignment, that people were asked to leave the organization, not because of skill and knowledge, but because of a bad fit behaviorally to the organization. The other way of looking at it is a lot of organizations have what they call their outstanding employee or great employee who, for whatever reason, thinks the grass is greener on the other side. He leaves or she leaves only to come back a day or a week later and say, "Can I have my old job back?" And you ask them why, and they say, "Well, I just don't like working there." And if you really dig below the surface, it's because the way they were treated is not the way they expected to be treated. So we're talking about here a behavior as the foundation for success, yet a behavior is an intangible. The behavior is an intangible, and the Times of London a long time ago I was reading defined an intangible as anything you can drop on your foot without hurting yourself. And definitely a behavior would fit that definition of an intangible. But it also is more important from the point of view of hiring for the right behaviors that fit your culture. As Einstein put it many years ago, not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts. So organizations can count skill and knowledge. You can read it on a resume. You can see it through a degree. You might see it through experience. You might give somebody an experiential test, a work test, and you see the skill and knowledge piece, but you can't quantify the behaviors. Now, one of the reasons that behavioral interviewing, I believe, fails is because while people might ask good behavioral questions, they have not properly defined, specific to their organization, the behavioral statements that define success. And without stating those behavioral statements and having a calibrated meaning among all those on the interview process, you're going to get different people defining them in different ways. And one of the problems with that is, what just happened there? One of the problems with that is that in order for a behavior to be measured, it has to describe an action that one can begin to visualize, give directions for, if it was a movie or a play. So let me give an example of what's the difference between an outcome statement versus a behavioral statement. An outcome statement would simply be, an outcome statement would simply be, demonstrates the ability to communicate well with others. See, as a result of doing something, the person interprets that they've communicated well with others. That's an outcome as a result of something, but that result is not in the behavior, not in the statement, demonstrates the ability to communicate well. If I were to put on Grammarly a WhatsApp message before I send it out, make sure it's spelled correctly, grammatically correct, is clear, is understood, and then transfer that to WhatsApp and send it out to my employees at 3 a.m., my boss could not argue with me that I did not fit that definition of demonstrates the ability to communicate clearly with others, because I did. I sent it out. Everybody got it at the same time. It was clear. It was spelled correctly, grammatically correct. It was there. But yet the organization behavior for having proper communications is to have a face-to-face relationship with the other person, allowing the other person to question your meaning. Now, you can begin to visualize that picture. The result of that would be clear communications. So when you begin to do behavioral interviewing, the first thing you have to have in place are clear statements of behavior that define successfully living your values, your culture, your organization's norms. At that point, not only will you be able to formulate a better interview question, which I will give you the steps to doing in a few minutes, but you will also be able to measure the answer against the behaviors that you're looking for. So it becomes kind of a matching game. The result is, no matter how much the person might like or dislike an individual when they walk in the door, and everybody does have their prejudices that kick in almost immediately. Those who say that I'm open-minded and wait till the end of the interview are giving you a line. We all have a nanosecond gut reaction to people. But by having those questions that all your candidates are asked, and having the statements of behavior that define successfully demonstrating your values, you then compare the answers to those statements, and whether you like the person or not initially, the person that actually matches up better will have a fair and accurate chance of being hired. And just as an example, we were doing this once with many years ago with the Calgary Police Service, and as part of the process of going in and talking about what we can do for them and how to go about it, we were also told that at the end of the initial meeting, representatives from their various unions were going to come in and talk to us about our process and how we build a profile and what the interview process looked like. And when we told them that they were the ones that were going to have input to defining the behaviors, that it was about identifying what the highly successful person does when they are being successful versus the average or successful employee, they bought into it. And the discussion with the unions might have lasted 10 minutes, to which point they all kind of looked at each other and said, we're fine with this. So I've worked with other unions, organizations that have unions, and in reality is unions want the same thing. They want to make sure that the best person for the job is there doing the job. The difference is they just don't see that it's a fair process at times, so they simply go by seniority, and all you have to say is most qualified and then seniority. So if you've all had behavioral interview training or taken any interview training, you have been told the answer to this question is the best predictor of the future is the past. Past behavior predicts future behavior. Past performance predicts future performance. Here's the problem with that. It's not true. So what does that mean? By hiring for fit to company culture, you increase the chances of retention, engagement, and productivity. And if somebody is happy at work, somebody sees that there's a purpose for the work they're doing, if somebody believes that the work they're doing and the contribution they're making is important to the success of the organization they believe in and they joined, they will be able to be retained. They'll be engaged. They'll be productive. And why am I emphasizing the people side? Well, over 100 years ago, the robber baron Andrew Carnegie is quoted as saying that if you take away my people but leave my factories, soon grass will grow on the factory floors. Take away my factories and leave my people, and soon we will have a new and better factory. It is people that make the difference. Organizations are not innovative. People are innovative. Organizations don't make decisions. People make decisions. And it's getting those people aligned and excited and engaged that will enable people to understand what's going on and that they are the center of attention. So how do I get now to write a behavioral question? So let me take a second and ask each of you what you think is a behavioral question. And let me just begin by saying this. I've asked this question universally all over, and I get the same answers regardless of where I am in the world. I said, when a child comes home from school, what are the questions that parents ask? And they ask, what did you learn in school today? And the answer is nothing. How was school today? Okay or boring? And do you have any homework? And of course, the answer is no. The reason we're getting those answers and not finding out the truth is because we're asking the wrong questions. Now, let me begin by giving you some criteria against which I believe you can construct a well-defined behavioral question. Before starting, you must refer to your values. You must know what are those behavioral characteristics that make up respect, make up creativity, make up customer service, make up whatever it is. One warning I will give you is my belief that integrity, which is the second most commonly used statement of a value, is actually not a value, but the sum total of living your values. Why is integrity not a value? Because it says integrity's general meaning is you do what you say and say what you're going to do. It's a commitment to do what you say. So if you don't live one of your values, you can't have integrity because it overlaps with everything. So I believe that employees and organizations or anybody has integrity when they live their values. But trying to define integrity without also using words from the other values is often very difficult. So you need to start by understanding specifically what are the actions, what are the behaviors that define your values. Review those behaviors associated with the values and tweak those statements to make sure that they are behavioral statements and not outcome statements. In other words, have an understanding of what that action looks like in your workplace. For instance, if I'm hiring somebody in an organization that values innovation actions under those values might be a little bit different in research and development than it is in finance. Because in finance, you probably don't want people coming up with things that are against the law, though they're very innovative. Ensure that all engaged in the hiring decision have the same understanding of these behaviors as they apply in their workspace. So you should review those questions and what would be an appropriate answer to those questions before the first candidate responds. First thing in building a question is that there's basically only a few ways to start it. 4. Tell me about describe a situation, give me an example, share with us. That needs to be the beginning caveat. Now, people often ruin the beginning and make it a closed-end question by saying, could you? Often they say, we want to be polite, but could you can mean yes or no. A behavioral question is written in such a way that it begs an answer. So in order to be polite, I say, put the word please before each phrase. Please tell me, please describe, please give me, please share. That's the first thing. Second thing, you should not mention the specific behavior in the question. One of the big faults people do is people that are coming in for the interview are looking for that hidden message in the question that gives away what you're looking for. And then whether they've done it or not, they incorporate that in their answer and it sounds great. So if you're looking, let's say, for customer service, and one of the behaviors is responds calmly, you don't want to ask, tell me about a time when you responded calmly. You want to say, tell me about a time when you dealt with the most frustrating, difficult customer you ever dealt with. Now, if they talk about being calm, that's one thing. And if they talk about getting frustrated and simply passing it off to a coworker, that's another thing. But you're not giving them the answer in the question. And the other one is don't telegraph the answer. Hopefully everybody out there is either well read enough or knowledgeable enough or old enough to know what a telegraph is, but don't give away, don't send a message in advance as to what you're looking for. And this is done in two ways. The first and most common way is when the interview begins, you give a context for the job. Wrong way of beginning. At our company, we really, we believe in A, B, C, and D, and we're looking for a person that can do this, and we want to build the organization in this way. And you go on and ramble on for 5-6 minutes about what you're looking for. And anybody with half of an intelligence is going to remember that and incorporate that back into their answer. The other way we telegraph an answer in the question itself is to give it what I call a preamble or a telegraph, and says, we're looking for somebody who has really demonstrated the ability to work well with others and be a team player, which means yada, yada, yada. Tell me about a time when. Don't give any information away before you ask the question. You're not there to tell them the answer or tell them what the organization is like until after they answer their questions. So don't telegraph the answers either in the introduction or just before you ask the question. The statement needs to contain a differentiating word such as the most challenging. If I were to ask somebody about customer service and I were to ask them, tell me about a time that you dealt with a customer, and they've dealt with hundreds of customers, they're not going to be able to give me an answer. I'm not differentiating the wording of the question to build a response, a foundation for a response. I need to tell me about the most rewarding customer you've ever dealt with. Tell me about a customer that challenged your thinking and helped you grow in your ability to do your work. And the second part of that, or the next comment I'm building it, is recent. Because remember I said, recent behavior is more important than past behavior. Past behavior does not predict future behavior. We're not all the same people we were at college or high school. And if we base ourselves on that, we're going to probably have a lot of surprises. So I want to know what was the recent behavior. And by recent, I mean anything within the last 2 years. If they tell you a story and it's the right behavior and it's 4 or 5 years ago, and the other candidate tells you a story and it's the right behavior and it's only from 6 months ago, the candidate with more recent demonstration of behavior does have a higher probability of demonstrating that behavior. And don't use words that allow for the hypothetical situation or theoretical response. You know, what would you do if you were in this situation? Now, most people are going to be interviewing have either life experiences, or they've gone online and they've watched a number of YouTube videos, or they paid for coaching online how to answer questions, and they're going to come up with great answers, but it doesn't mean they're actually going to do it. The simplest way for you to understand this that I can figure is a lot of people in this world have taken CPR training. And the question I ask is, how many of you have actually used it? And how many of you have been in a situation where you did use it, could have used it, but you are happy somebody else did it because you hesitated or didn't do it at all? And I find many, many people who have the skill and knowledge, who have the right behavior, have not actually done it. So you don't want to use, because they can give you a great what if answer, a would have, could have, or should have answer. If the words would have, could have, or should have come up in the interview answer, take a pause and ask the person, what did they actually do? So engaging the candidate so the candidate feels compelled to disclose how she is or he is behaving. In reality, if you look at a well-constructed behavioral question, there is no question mark at the end. Don't ruin a good question with, and what did you do? Or any of the other probing questions. So here's some quick examples. I'm not going to read them. I'll give you a second for you to read them yourself. Here are some examples of what I consider well-constructed behavioral interview questions. One of my favorite questions I discovered with a client to ask for a plant manager was, tell me about a time recently when you had to make a hard choice immediately between quality or quantity. And they've gotten some really interesting answers to that. So just in summary, define the authentic values, not the ones that are on the wall, but the ones that are really lived. Validate the behaviors for those values with people in the organization, not a consultant. You can always use a consultant to help you do it, but don't you have the consultant tell you what the behaviors are. Have your people say what the behaviors are. Calibrate an understanding between all of those in the interview process. Write actual behavioral questions that are specific to your values and your culture, and measure how frequently and recently the candidates have told you stories validating that. And what it's all about is simple. Is the power of hiring for fit to culture is this. If we know our values, we understand our vision, which is powerful, and the catchword for that these days is purpose. We know our strategic plan. We know the correctness of the strategic plan is because it will cause us to live our values and bring us closer to our vision. Otherwise, the strategic plan is wrong. We can therefore have every business unit have its goals and objectives, which allows our teams and individuals to know they're contributing to something bigger than themselves. We create a line of sight. A line of sight is, what if all of your people have a clear line of sight? What if they all feel energized and passionate about what they're doing? What if they all feel that they are the cause of a company's success? Just like President Kennedy, when he was in Houston, is known to have asked the janitor, what are you doing here? What's your purpose here? And his answer was putting a man on the moon. What if each of your employees, whether they're the receptionist, whether they're janitorial staff, whether they're CEO, all had the same answer? How powerful would that be? It will result in your employees who are engaged, productive, retained, and find meaning in what they do and want to stay in the organization. That briefly is an overview of why behavioral interviewing for fit to culture, will get you the ability to be productive and have employees that stay with you a while.
Thank you very much, David. It's always a pleasure to follow you and take a minute just to share our success and where we're focused in the market. And really, what we're doing is complementing across the continuum from hiring to engagement to productivity the tools that you need to ensure that the employee comes on board, is trained well, feels appreciated, and begins to become a productive employee of your organization. One of the challenges that we're faced with now in this globally competitive world where customers are sacred for all of us is that we need those that we have hired strategically to come on board and be engaged and to reflect the values of the organization. And this slide just illustrates some of the costs if we fail at that. Our success in onboarding really isn't simply a single phase of signing all of your benefit statements, doing all of your tax forms, and then resubmitting them. It is across a continuum. And what research tells it is that 58%, if we do this successfully, then we have 58% of our employees staying longer than 3 years. And for anyone that's been on LinkedIn recently and looks at some of our dear friends or peers or contemporaries, 3 years appears to be a long time in many cases. What we're also looking to accomplish in supporting David's efforts and your efforts at hiring the right person is to strengthen the workplace's culture, provide better performance, and give that employee a little bit of a break on the stress in the world. And the phases, for many people that we work with and many organizations that we work with, there is a thought that onboarding is a day or maybe a week, but it's not. There are phases in onboarding that are supported by technology where you can outline who a buddy system or other areas for onboarding, and it could take a year to onboard them successfully in many cases. And what we really are looking for in supporting this and to complement what David has said is we want that fully engaged and fully productive person whom we saw in the interview process and hired to represent the organization well. And some of the things that we do in terms of working with organizations, as Dave has done, is we really try to look at getting agreement on what success means for that organization. And we provide the HR technology to ensure that the steps to success are there, the formula is in place, and what you have at the end is a fully engaged employee.
Yeah, no, as Mike has said, please give either of us a call. We'll gladly answer any of your questions. Email us or call us. And, we're always interested to hear back from you. It helps us in refining what we're talking about and focusing. What are your key learnings from today? What remaining questions do you have? And of course, we thank you all for your giving up part of your day to participate with us in this brief introduction to topics which we have presented today. Let me just add one thing. You talked about in the software measuring the fact of turnovers is a costly thing. I do want to say that the research shows that the cost of replacing an entry-level employee is usually 1.5 times salary. Replacing a middle manager is anywhere from 3 to 5 times salary. And replacing a senior executive is anywhere from 10 times total compensation. So we do know that if you were to multiply out the cost of those people that have left times their salary, whatever appropriate that is, that had to be replaced this year, whether they left willingly or unwillingly, you probably have a significant number that you can reduce. And I find that when we talk that way to senior leaders, it helps them understand that the selection process is not an HR activity. It is simply a business activity that really needs to be followed and understood as a business activity and not an HR activity. So the cost of hiring is quite significant, and the cost of replacing somebody is even greater.
So why don't we conclude? Again, a thank you from David and I to you for sharing your time with us. And as I said, my deep respect for David. Thank you very much for joining us today, David.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity.